For the past 7 years of Dragon Ball Fighter's lifespan, Yamcha has had a 7-frame jab. Generally, if a character has a 7-frame jab, it's there for some sort of reason. Either they have powerful tools to contest some very common game situations that, in addition to having a 6-frame jab, would make them very strong, or their jab has some other properties to it that would make it completely busted if it was a 6-frame jab. Think of something like Vegito's 5L. It's a multi-hitting jab attack that would instantly win any clash situation if it was a 6-frame jab. So to avoid those situations, it has 1 frame slower startup so that it would lose to 6-frame jabs that are smaller than its hitbox and also only hit a single time. In addition to that, though, if you usually have a 7-frame jab, there's been parts of your kit that have been able to compensate for it in various situations. Let's go ahead and take a look at a situation with a blocked 6M, the universal overhead. If both Tien and GT Goku press here, then they're going to clash. And, you know, if their hitboxes and everything else aligned, they would actually be able to clash just like that, creating a whole bunch of situations where option selects are coming into play, character choices are coming into play. It's a very interactive system. And you generally want a 6-frame jab so you can participate in those situations. But because Yamcha has a 7-frame jab, he's not able to, because in these situations, his jab would have outright lose to these 6-frame normals. And at the time, throughout most of the game's lifespan, he hasn't really had options to deal with this. On release, his special moves weren't like 4-frame startup invincible, so he couldn't really contest with these jabs. And while he did have other answers, such as backing off, you know, doing a backdash, if he was cornered, then he didn't have that option. Not to mention, too, that because of this weakness in his kit, it meant that Yamcha going for 6Ms was actually a means for him to give up the turn more often than not. Again, because he couldn't participate in these Clash games. Bandai has tried to do a couple of things to make it so that Yamcha could participate in them with some new and interesting tools. Tools like giving his 5M 4-frame startup invincibility. So if the opponent actually mashed, you'd be able to actually punish them and get a medium starter. However, depending on the character, your results could vary. So we have a couple of examples here where we're going to use something like this recording. I don't need it to play. But if GT Goku mashes his full auto combo in this situation, we can see that Yamcha would beat it cleanly. And we can also tell that the recording is playing correctly because Yamcha's 5L would lose in this situation, but his 5M would win. In addition to that, you know, there's always his 5H tool, which now has full invincibility as well. So against these very active auto combo presses, Yamcha could still be invincible and catch the opponent. However, this is just like against GT Goku. If we look at a character like Labcode 21 instead, we can see that her 5L is actually able to punish Yamcha's 5M, and I think this has to do with the fact that it's a standing low that's actually able to advance and reach Yamcha. I also think that her 5LL reaches long enough so that his 5H also gets caught here. So even against like a character like Labcoat, Yamcha still has to just give up the turn after his 6H. I can't do anything out of that 5H. So these tools that Bandai has given Yamcha to try and be able to contest some of these +0 on block situations simply don't work to actually do that. They just are kind of like these weird gimmicky things that may come up from time to time or be matchup specific, but if the opponent has the right character and the knowledge, Yamcha is just as vulnerable to these situations as he was previously. So what is Bandai to do about this? Now, after all these years, Yamcha's standing light attack is finally a 6-frame jab. This is nice for Yamcha because instead of having to rely on his 6-frame 2L, for pretty much all these situations I was discussing, Yamcha can now threaten his farther-reaching 5L, and he could also potentially go into his auto combo afterwards in a lot of these situations. And this also just opens up a whole bunch of new ways for Yamcha to engage in these +0 on block situations. Like, he can now clash using his 5L, which means he could, you know, potentially threaten his 9-frame auto combo second attack in these situations, whereas he never had a chance of even doing that before. And, you know, instead of having to, you know, worry about choosing the right normal at a given moment, Yamcha can just choose either one of his jabs and be fine. If you slipped and you forgot to, hold down crouch and you went for 5L before and you lost the class situation, well, that would probably be a pretty crappy feeling, but it would be a mistake on your part. In addition to that, too, now because Yamcha can threaten with these things, there's just a lot more options, Like, the opponent can't really just play around some of these instances with that 2L. So, for example, we looked at some recordings previously where we had, GT Goku do things like poke out with his 2L, right, against 5M, which would work before. But now Yamcha can just 5L and completely beat that. Not only that, if we're probably going to be able to dig deep enough just with the startup and things, I wouldn't be surprised if some OSs exist to give Yamcha access to ways to combo into this 5M attack of his, but, you're probably more or less going to go into 2M more often than not and threaten 5M at different moments. But, if you clash using your 5L, you're actually going to be able to threaten. Right, GT Goku I don't think is timed quite right for this to clash. But, this is a pretty nice feeling for Yamcha players to have, where you just have options in your clash situations, right? You could go for the invincible normal option. You can swing with whichever light normal you prefer to do. And it's just, it's sort of nice. Again, you had options with this with 2L, but this will namely be a big buff for some of his synergy and situations regarding his pressure overall. So if we look at Labco 21, right, she's got this auto combo, and we can actually create this situation. Right, all of a sudden, we're clashing with her second hit of her auto combo with our own auto combo, right? If we're just letting this full thing rip, that's a situation that couldn't happen before for Yamcha, and that just opens up new opportunities for Yamcha to engage with the opponent character. I'm not able to execute right now for some reason. But, right, all of a sudden, we can react to this double hit clash sequence. Or, we can go for the double 2Ls and win this outright. Like, it's just nice. Like, Yamcha can just go for either one of these situations. If 5L just will have some very niche new applications because of this change. And, if we look at this situation, clash into 5M, all of a sudden, we can go for 5L, see the clash, go into 5M, or just auto buffer it like that, whatever works. Yamcha just has a lot more choices to make in a lot of these situations, and I think that this 5L being 6 frame is just a nice change for him, considering its range advantage over his 2L. Speaking of his 2L, let's go ahead and look at a change there. Previously, if you performed Yamcha's crouching light attack after his standing light attack in a block string, the opponent would be pushed out too far for you to go into another crouching light jab. This is very detrimental to Yamcha previously because when he had his 7-frame jab, he was +0 on block, but because his 6-frame normal would whiff on you, if you didn't do anything here, well, then he would just get whiff punished pretty much. And if he tried to press with his 5L jab against you, and you had a 6-frame jab, well, then he would lose. And of course, his jab could clash with some other jabs in advancing things like that, but the opponent with good matchup knowledge here didn't have to participate in this mind game. And, if they just didn't do anything out of this, well, that's just kind of sad. So how do they change the pushback on block from 2L? Well, let's take a look. If you do it into itself, or you start with it, the opponent is not really pushed back at all. But if you do it from 5L, there's considerably more pushback for Yamcha here, which could just mean differences in his overall block situation. This also applies to Yamcha in the corner, creating space like this. So maybe you can threaten with like some spacing traps here a little more reliably than you could otherwise. There's going to be a lot of things to sort of work with here, but this namely will also give him huge benefits because thanks to the buff to his 5L now being 6 frame, he can actually take advantage of the space. So the opponent mashes at the right moment against you, you got a 6 frame normal. You're not really scared of them going in with this option, and you can engage in those clash situations. Compare that to like a situation like this, where Yamcha's 2L is completely whiffing from this block string. he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. And I think this is going to be the biggest impact of the buff to his 5L. Everything else I've talked about is kind of like icing on the cake, as it were. But it's nice that Yamcha actually has the ability to really take advantage of the fact that he has a +0 on block 2L. Not to mention, as well, he can go for these 6Ms, and he doesn't have to, like, add in an extra light for scaling and then go into his auto combo. If you want to go into those things, you can just go into his auto combo like this, which means you can give yourself access to the vacuum properties of his auto combo a lot more readily and easily. So I know I talked a bit more about 5L there, but the crouching light attack change is very much related to the standing light attack change, so I think it's worth discussing both of them and how they cooperate with each other. Previously, Yamcha's crouching medium attack was 10 frame startup. This is pretty standard for a medium low normal, but since Yamcha doesn't have a low 2L, the fact that his fastest medium was 10 frame startup really hurt his opportunities to mix you with high and low mix-ups. To speak to my point about how this makes Yamcha's high-low mix-ups weaker, let's go ahead and look at a very common mix-up in Dragon Ball FighterZ, the Super Dash Assist High-Low 50-50. So, when Yamcha is going to do, on this slot 6, we have these two active recordings, and on 6, he's going to dash up, super dash, and go for a delayed air dash overhead to try and catch us moving from a standing guard to a crouching guard and open us up that way. On recording number 7, he's going to just land and go for 2M, which is hitting at its fastest possible frame, frame 10 in this situation. And frame 10 is just too slow for this to be a true high-low 50-50. You can fuzzy this with some pretty precise timing, meaning that you can block the high, switch to low, and block both the high and the low mix-ups on their different frames because they don't connect on the same frame. And if your execution is good, it basically nullifies this mix-up completely. It's still possible to get hit, especially if you misinput your fuzzy block timing, but with practice and awareness, it can be pretty consistent to defend against this. So we're going to let the recordings run on repeat randomly and see how many of these I block. So we blocked many of these back-to-back in a row, and I'm not even trying to guess between these two options. In this matchup against Yamcha, I'm more or less looking for him to land and go for that 2M low, and it's pretty, straightforward to defend against myself. I have to say that you can mess this up, and sometimes you could be caught off guard by this, but it's much less of a guessing game and an actual mix-up as it is just like an execution check from the Yamcha side. I mean, we ran several takes right there, and only one of them hit me. Some other attempts, I've definitely been hit more often, and if we just boot it up again and see what happens... if I have bad fuzzy defense here, and if I'm continually going low too soon, well, then this overhead can definitely catch me. But if I correct my timing, then you can see that you can pretty consistently defend against both options. And this is generally true for any sort of low that takes more than about 9 frames to come through. Again, just for another demonstration, it's not a foolproof defense, especially for a human to do, but it's not as effective as what you would get from other Super Dash high-low 50-50s. Now, 2M is 2 frames faster, so it's an 8-frame startup move. Keep in mind, this has been a very acceptable metric for high-low mix-up light-low attacks for quite a while, and now Yamcha has this on a medium. If you recall from my earlier defense example, while the overheads from Yamcha would catch me from time to time if my guard timing was off in some way, I really never got opened up by the 2M low, and it nearly wasn't as frequent as the block on high. But now with this faster 2M, Yamcha actually has some Super Dash mix that rivals that of Jiren and Ginyu. I can't believe those are the two gold standards I had to compare to because they got the fast medium low starters now. So if Yamcha tries to go for this mix-up in the same way, you're just genuinely guessing. And let me make sure that my command history is off so we're not freaking out about that. Like the same timing that I would be able to see that he's landed and shift my block from high to low, it's still kind of there, but I'm going to be opened up. Obviously, you know, if my fuzzy timing is correct, and I stick to my fuzzy timing, that low's never really going to hit me. And if I just guess low and whatnot, but this is like real mix-up here. So Yamcha actually has access to one of the most potent tools in Dragon Ball FighterZ, and he gets some of the best rewards off of it too, considering it's a medium starter. This, I think, is a very underrated change for Yamcha. Reverse Wolf Fang Fist has 2 buffs to it. First of all, they sped up the attack startup. Previously, it took about 32 frames for Yamcha to disappear to the other side and attack the opponent. On top of that, there was only one behavior. So no matter what Yamcha did in this situation, it would always be a cross-up. Now, the patch notes say that they sped the attack startup. However, that's not quite all that's, you know, cooking under the hood. There's a couple other changes going on here. So at point-blank range, yes, you do cross up the opponent a little bit faster. Like we can see here that this will now have Yamcha attack and connect to the opponent after 30 frames. But if you're spaced out a bit, it takes just a little bit longer because Yamcha is kind of doing this longer sort of dash up to you, and then he teleports to the other side of you now. A little bit of a different visual behavior, and there's also a secondary behavior. If you hold down the button, Yamcha will stay on the same side, attacking at frame 25 in this example. So now Yamcha kind of has like this tool to jump across the screen at you. And, you know, if you're too far out, then you'll never get the cross-up. But if you're close enough, then the cross-up could come through. Now, this really isn't the best mix-up in the world. After all, like, the cross-up is hitting, like, some 7 to 10 frames later than the same side version. Or, you know, 5 in this example. So there's definitely room for you to do a fuzzy jump here, a fuzzy left-right block once you recognize that's the version that he's going for. But it is something to add to his mental stack in some of these situations. I don't think it's the most important buff for Yamcha, but it could also, you know, just be used for some combo routing, right? Like if I were to try to do something like this before, you can see here that going for the, you know, cross-up version didn't work. And the same side version is also just a little bit too slow. But in terms of sparking cancels, right, this one wouldn't work before, but the medium version, when you hold it down, will now actually combo in that situation, thanks to the change to the medium version of Reverse Wolf Fang Fist, or just Reverse Wolf Fang Fist, and as well as to some other changes in Yamcha's kit. Let's get moving on. The next move to look at is to Wolf Fang Fist's first follow-up attack, Pack Attack. So, we're going to back up real quick because we're going to take a look at the amount of key gauge the move used to build. We're going to whiff the light version of Wolf Fang Fist and then go into Pack Attack. So Pack Attack is that series of multi-hitting strikes that Yamcha does, and as you can see, didn't quite build quarter of a bar with the light version of Pack Attack. As for the medium version, it's a little less than that, I think, just because we missed a move. In the context of Yamcha's kit, if we hit with Wolf Fang Fist, previously Yamcha would build up just over of a quarter of a bar using the light version. And it would go slightly above a quarter of a bar with the slower medium version. So not too much meter build for Yamcha here. Let's take a look at the key gauge now of Pack Attack in the current patch. If you do the light version, you get just over a quarter of a bar actually now. And the medium version will also build very comparable bar routes now. So instead of a little bit of a discrepancy, the medium version I think is strictly better because it's doing more damage on average than the light version, especially with another change to the medium version, which we'll discuss in just a few moments. But in the context of Yamcha connecting a full Wolf Fang Fist, Yamcha's almost building half a bar using light Pack Attack. And with the medium Pack Attack. These like subtle increase in meter builds can be the difference between Yamcha building enough to drop one more bar of super in a combo as opposed to not getting it. And that build is also quite impressive when he's in sparking. almost a full bar, nearly 3/4 of a bar when you're in Spark, just as off of the Wolf Fang Fist follow-up. This is pretty big build for Yamcha that will also combine with the new limit break meter gain that you have as well. Yamcha's pretty much building a bar of meter whenever he does a Wolf Fang Fist into pack attack when he's Anchor and Spark. That's kinda nutty. Now let's take a look at the medium version of Pack Attack's specific changes. So starting off, they've changed the damage, and then they also changed the knockback. All 8 hits as a starter would do 1,144 damage, so we'll use that metric for comparison. Obviously, this damage would be a little bit lower when you're actually hitting with this move, because generally speaking, you're going to be hitting this in the middle of combos. Right, but off of a 5L starter, going into it, Yamcha was hitting about 2.4 damage before. With a medium starter, right, you were hitting about 2,000 damage before. In addition to that, you can see that GT Goku was kept pretty close to Yamcha previously. Close enough for pretty much everything to work as it did. You know, you could do like the medium follow-up. You couldn't link into a Kamehameha. You know, with an early cancel or a late cancel. Gale Claw would work as a potential combo finisher in most cases, so we're going to keep track of those as we take a look at the new version. Now let's take a look at the increased damage and knockback on the medium Wolfpack attack. 1634, nearly a 500 damage increase compared to its previous like base value, if you will. This means that in terms of Yamcha's combos off of scaled starters, Yamcha's adding a couple hundred extra points of damage on pretty much all of the confirms he's going for. Which is nice. This can help him hit some very important damage thresholds when it comes to his combo routing. As far as the knockback on hit, you can tell that GT Goku flies a little farther away. It's a very subtle change, and from my testing, it doesn't really open up new things for Yamcha. Like, you know, the Kamehameha still doesn't work in mid-screen or in the corner, though if the opponent's standing, it certainly does. Right, like, so all that will work on, like, a standing opponent. Like, nothing's really changed there. The Gale Claw cancel still works as well. So I can only really like guess that this might have something to do to help him out with like some sparking cancels, or potentially just give him slightly more corner carry than he did before. If anyone can kind of explain some deeper ramifications of the change thanks to the increased knockback in the comments, we'd appreciate it. Let's look at Wolf Fang Fist Finisher now, with light and medium version both receiving their own set of unique adjustments. Starting with the light version, the knockback on hit has been adjusted. So as you can see, it's very similar to what we saw with the medium pack attack, where GT Goku's popped up for a bit, and that's kind of it. In sparking, Yamcha would be a little like strained to find pickups here. Even with the special cancel feature, the Kamehameha there doesn't work. Neither would starting up with a medium version of Wolf Fang Fist. You'd have to settle for something like the EX version to extend the combo off of there, or, you know, going for Gale Claw's Maniac, a couple other things that meant that you would have to invest some sort of resource or get particularly low value hits or undesirable hits. You know, there was just like better hits that you were looking for, but you weren't able to route into it before. And now for the new knockback hit for the light finisher of Wolf Fang Fist. As you can tell, there's a little bit of a ground bounce happening here, which should mean that it's easier for Yamcha to pick up combos using assists. Which again, can be a pretty big buff for just the confirms that Yamcha can get off of this attack. Not to mention, while he can't cancel special moves without sparking, there might be some new opportunities to get new follow-ups in here thanks to this change. I demonstrated one earlier, actually, with the medium version of Wolf Fang Fist, and that changed to it as well. So there might be some new combo routes for Yamcha to explore, and I promise at the end of this video, once we go through everything, we're going to be taking a look at Yamcha's combos. The medium version of Fang Fist's finisher has its own set of buffs, as I mentioned, so let's look at those. They've increased the block stun of the move itself. Previously, this used to be -5 on block. Now, the change to the block stun for the medium Fang Fist finisher isn't as big as you would think it is. Only -4 instead of -5, which you might ask, well, what's the point of that then? It's still a safe on block option, but why a 1-frame difference? Well, I think the answer to that actually has to do with the fact that previously, if Yamcha was, -5, he wouldn't be able to have threatened with his 4-frame startup invincible 5M attack. The opponent's jab would have just been able to pretty much clip him out of it. But if we go ahead and kind of swap some things around for visual clarity and then have the dummy do this, now that the Fang Fist finisher medium is -4 on block, Yamcha could use this to end block strings and then RPS using his invincible normal attacks. There I was able to catch. And my 5L caught there, right? But, depending on the timing and everything like that, this 5M actually has a chance of working for Yamcha. Obviously, your results are going to vary on the matchup, as well as the reach. Someone busts out with 5LL, then you're kind of asking for trouble, but I guess that's what 5H could be there for. It's sort of just, I think, another opportunity for Yamcha to try and play around with these tools. I don't think it's necessarily that strong, but it could come up in some very specific situations. Additionally, the knockback on hit has been adjusted when you don't get the smash sliding knockdown animation to play. Say in a situation where you've already used it, like you just anti-air or air-to-air the opponent using Gale's Claw Maniac from Yamcha and burn that sliding knockdown. The medium version used to send the opponent to full screen, and while you could do some sparking cancels in the corner or, use most of your assist to get a pickup there, if you were mid-screen and you didn't have either of those options, well, you were kind of, just broke on what to do. So now let's take a look at the adjusted knockback on hit. As you can see, the opponent actually kind of lingers a little closer to Yamcha than they previously did, which I think opens up some new potential combo routes for Yamcha if he already used his sliding knockdown a little earlier in the combo. We'll explore that later. All versions of Gale's Claw Maniac have increased stun time aside from the final attack. This is probably just a bug fix here, or, a pseudo bug fix to make sure that at very high hit stun scale decays, Yamcha doesn't have the opponent fall out of this attack anymore. Unfortunately, I don't have any on-hand examples for the buff to Gale Claw's Maniac. I would just imagine that if there were Yamcha players who were trying to lab out combos and for some reason, like Gale Claw's Maniac was dropping at times because of the hit stun decay in their combos, that maybe those are a little more consistent. And I definitely have seen it a few times in matches where people have just fallen out of the move before it finishes. So ideally, that should not really happen anymore for Yamcha. If there's Yamcha players that can give some more information on that change or some examples, we'd appreciate it. Let us know in the comments. The last change is to Neo Fang Fist, the entire move. There's a follow-up that we largely refer to as the Neo Fang Fist, but as I will demonstrate later, that actual part of the move itself hasn't really been changed. It's only with regards to when you use the full Rekka series, as I demonstrated here. Previously, if you were to do a second Neo Fang Fist after you use a smash launcher, then this would happen. The opponent would just fly across the screen, and there really wasn't much Yamcha could do with this particular follow-up. And now for a look at the smashless knockback for Neo Fang Fist. As you can see, there's actually a wall bounce effect to the move now, so there's possible new combo potential for it. In the corner, depending on the height of the dummy, it will either keep them in the corner or you could potentially have them pop out of the corner. Such as that, but I think the main purpose for this is to allow it so that Yamcha can easily combo into a level 1 off of a Neo Fang Fist after a smash launcher, like so. Just as like an example, you do need to keep the enemy close enough to the ground for that link to actually work. If they're too high, then the first hit of your Spirit Ball is going to whiff. So this might be a nice way for Yamcha to tack on a little bit more damage to then go into his DHCs without really compromising too much on what he can do in his combo routes. Speaking of those, let's take a look at all that. All right, taking a look at Twitter, the first thing I want to highlight is RG Kevin Sevens, a bit of Yamcha tech here, and I think this might be a result of the earlier change to the Wolf Fang Fist Pack Attack Mediums versions, increased knockback. You can now actually link several different normals after 236 light medium, and then using his fishtail follow-up. I think that's what it's called. It's either fishtail or wolftail. But some examples of this would look like so. So in mid-screen, you're actually able to do a combo like this. And I mean, if you look at all this, Yamcha built almost 2.5 bars from that mid-screen sequence. Now in the corner, there's also some potential loop combos as well. So if you actually see that you frame trap the opponent, even against airborne opponents in the corner, you actually have access to some grounded loops. From that frame trap starter, looks like Yamcha was able to do about 4.2k damage, which I think is pretty good. It is going to be a scaled starter because, you know, it's a frame trap and a Rekka. And almost 2 bars of meter built for that as well. So there already is some useful tech for Yamcha that I wasn't able to fully appreciate before. For some more optimized use cases, we actually looked to one of my fellow Colorado players, Aqua Spikes, who was doing a lot of labbing with Yamcha when the 1.40 patch dropped. So if we actually jump right into it, you can kind of get an example of using some of these earlier Rekka cancels and adding in some more optimal moves. Medium pack attack into the success there, linking into a Kamehameha. So you can see off of that combo, Yamcha just built 3 bars solo, meaning that he was able to give himself level 3 Oki all on his own. And with a unscaled starter example, Aqua Spikes can actually showcase that Yamcha is able to break 6k damage solo. And if you get a 5M route, well then your combo routing is going to look something like this. And, you know, he's also taking advantage of the fact that with a high enough character spacing, you actually are able to link a Kamehameha. If we take a second look at it, you know, this is some of the Air series. That looks like the light pack attack. This is the medium pack attack into the Wolfang Fist S to then go into the finisher sequence. So using some of those Wolfang Fist S follow-ups to get the dash cancels in the middle of these Rekkas are going to be very important. I think that there's quite a bit to really dive in and explore with Yamcha, and we're just scratching the surface of it. And of course, if you're able to combine some of these changes to Yamcha's Rekka routing and then apply it to some of the sparking cancels he's been able to do, then you can get some very efficient TOD situations. This is an example of a limit break TOD using sparking, starting off with pretty much the bare minimum you can get in limit break, which would be a single bar. There's going to be some very tricky jump cancels in here, as you can tell. But towards the end of it, we're applying those same principles for the Wolfang Fist. You know, doing the dash follow-up into the next Rekka series, some special cancels. And then making sure we direct the Spirit Ball to keep the corner so that this Wolfang Fist will also connect. But I mean, you know, that's kind of a terrifying situation. Yamcha had 1 bar and ended it with 7 bars, which he then was able to spend 4 of to kill the opponent. I think there's some genuine potential for Yamcha as an anchor, provided you're willing to play Yamcha in the first place. So where does this actually leave Yamcha? For the past couple of years, Yamcha has largely been considered a bottom 3 character, and I think that that opinion was warranted. Almost anything the character wanted to do, top-tier characters also offered, along with just better tools. You wanted better zoning, well, you know, you can almost look to anybody, really. If you want a better rushdown or some projectile immunity, I mean, look no further than Gogeta 4, for example. And if you wanted a lockdown assist, well, most of the strike lariat assists that exist in the game are just as fast as Yamcha and have even equivalent or slightly more block stun than Yamcha's A assist, which used to be like the pinnacle of a lariat assist. And now that almost every lariat style assist matches it in terms of its startup frames, in terms of its AoE, in terms of its lockdown. There's just not really much of a point to truly pick Yamcha, or at least there wasn't. I genuinely think that he's not that bad in this version. I mean, he's got true 50-50 mix with Super Dash once he gets you to the corner. He's got some excellent confirms that do a lot more damage, a lot more meter build, thanks to these buffs. I think that, he does have a good A assist, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of other assists like it, but it's still like those other assists. It's a good, fast lockdown lariat style assist. And I think that there is just a lot of potential with the character that is really yet to be explored. And we've seen some players in the last year, even before these buffs, do very well with Yamcha. Shingo, for example, comes to mind, as well as Kawalimba, who is a fantastic player from Mexico. I think that with this patch, like, Yamcha probably deserves to be explored quite a bit. I just look and see the things that Yamcha can do, and I'm like, there's probably something here that's worth exploring. I just think that for this player base at the size that it is right now, who wants to play Yamcha? I have this feeling that his reputation from the manga and the show kind of just like lead out in front of him, where it's like, who wants to play as the joke guy? Who wants to play as the lame-o that is Yamcha? There's so many cooler characters out there in the game, but genuinely, Fighters does him some royal treatment. This is easily like the coolest I think the character has ever been in terms of his representation, and I think that this version of the character is actually probably competitively playable. It's just a matter of, is anyone really willing to invest that time into him to develop that much tech with the character? And as far as his combo game goes, I think that it's there. I think that it is competitively viable. I am a little bit worried about some of his mix-up potential. It's certainly a little better, especially with the ability to super dash high-low you. But as far as like, what his left-right game is and everything else like that, I do think there's a couple of holes that kind of need to be filled within that kit. And especially when it comes to also his neutral. His neutral, I think, is like the most suspect thing. Just like, how does a character like him rush you down when he doesn't have like projectile immunity on really any of his moves? You look at like some other characters, like Gogeta 4, these moves would have some sort of invincibility. And I honestly think this is maybe the only thing Yamcha is currently missing to really be a viable high-level meta threat. I do think he's viable to play, but you are definitely incurring some extra struggles by choosing to play this character. I wouldn't be surprised if they eventually pulled the trigger and give him some sort of projectile invincibility. I mean, they've given him full invincibility on some of his normal moves, interestingly enough. But we'll have to see what can be done to sort of address the neutral grievances with the character. So that's sort of like my own takeaway with Yamcha in this patch. I think he's underrated, but don't get me wrong, I still think he could use some more improvements.